Hello on YouTube, hello on Twitch. Welcome to another episode of my Hearts Iron 4 Let's Play series. This is Northstar. I hope you're well. Are taking care of each other and being kind to yourselves. For those new to my channel, welcome. Returning viewers, welcome back. Is there a way to change the... I should have probably... I'm not sure this is going to be such slow gaming as previous videos have been. Previous videos, I guess the last stream I got... As my brain actually works slower with my long COVID, sometimes I get carried away. My last stream is 3 hours, which on YouTube that'll be cut to videos probably an hour or less. But I'm gonna try and be maybe a little more aggressive. I'm sitting here with the cavalry division, and it's probably an attack, and it's definitely not gonna win. This is just gonna be attack, reorg, attack, reorg, attack, reorg, and it's gonna be about grinding XP for the general. And the junior officer Thomas Elfelt to eventually be promoted, this brigadier, to a general as well. It's turning manpower into experience. I don't know, ideological to give some more. People say, oh, this generates manpower out of thin air, and some people hate on it, especially people who like to play right-wing nations, but it's not. If you play as a generic fascist nation, you get extra recruitable population factor. Does that generate manpower out of thin air? Like, I'll select one, the Dominican Republic. They start fascist. This extra 2%, 1% recruitable population factor, is that manpower out of thin air? No, it just represents that more people can be drafted or will volunteer for the military without having to draft them, because military youth indoctrinates them. And the militarism, whatever. Ideological loyalty presumably represents, I think of it, as a focus on propaganda to get volunteers for the army instead of more effective actual army stuff. Like, you know, if I was running a professional officer for my divisions, gain experience faster, property heritage, my leaders would accomplish heritage and give out medals, elevate engineering core, railway guns to be more effective, and I would dig in faster. You get the idea. Other things benefit the army in some other way. Instead, communist nations focused on propaganda and having people making sure that the leaders of the armies are well-educated Marxism, or Marxist-Leninism, maybe. Well, not all Marxist countries are Marxist-Leninist. This is Marxist-Leninist, but not Stalinist. In fact, the leader, this guy was historically a Trotskyite who became a Stalinist. But when he becomes the leader of the country, you switch from Stalinism. So presumably, my leader is a Trotskyite. So anyways, Trotskyite propaganda, volunteers. It makes sense. People have even calculated the number of extra pops you get in the army. It's usually less for most nations than if you went fascist, so it's not an unreasonable number, unless you're like the People's Republic of Jan Mayen. Island with 10 core manpower, and then over the course of a year you get 26,000 manpower. Where does that come from? Presumably it's international brigades that actually come from other countries and migrate to the country just to join the army, which that's a lot of people. This will actually come into being, by the way, in my multiplayer game with Joe, because he's playing as Anglia. He's going to join Norway's faction. I'd switch them, let him in, because the AI wouldn't have let him in without having to do, I think, diplomatic pressure. I'm going to play as Norway eventually anyway, so I would have let him in. And then I realized it was stupid for him to join the faction because he's just going to keep getting pulled to wars that he wouldn't join. But I guess it does provide one benefit, and that's he gets intel without me having to tell him what's going on. It's just less annoying, and he can build naval bases in Norway. Like I built this one in Vestlandet north of Bergen when I was playing Assyria. So maybe he can improve the logistics in Norway before he joins the war, if he wants to spare the industry. But anyways, he's gonna puppet Jan Mayen. I've told him, like, after the war, when the peace conference happens, because it'll be Norway, Sweden, we fight. I've checked, and Finland will probably join the North American Alliance before we can possibly capitulate them, possibly even before he joins the war. But Norway, Sweden don't join the North American Alliance, so they didn't when I was playing until the Soviet Union declared on Finland, Sweden, Norway. And at that point, when they were at war with a major, and they had a common war with Finland, then they joined Finland's faction. It made sense. we should be able to capitulate Sweden and Norway if we're playing as Norway and Sweden before before Norway or Sweden join. Iceland will probably also peace out and join the American faction. They have a thing where they become a puppet and white peace anyone they're with. But I'm pretty sure as Syria, I almost reached Oslo before Norway joined the North American Alliance, or a little bit after, before the wars merged. So I'm pretty sure with Joe is England, we can take them out. And I'm like, you can puppet Jan Mayen, and what was it? One of the Danish corps, the Faroe Islands, right? Because the Faroe Islands, Denmark will venture a bell, and then I'm like, you can puppet the Faroe Islands, and that happens. So these are in the Norwegian Sea, North Atlantic region. Calls it Norwegian Sea, but this is the North Atlantic. I'm like, so yeah, you can the northern North Sea. I'm like, you can puppet the North Sea islands. And when Denmark rebels, I'll probably split off Bornholm as an independent communist country, and then I'll repuppet Denmark. And they actually balance power stuff. They get a overlord independence thing. Actually, when they rebel, they go get welfare back. So maybe I'll just leave Denmark alone. They become non-aligned when they rebel. Maybe I'll just leave them alone as a non-aligned country and force some communists later, or maybe use spies to do it to avoid a war. Because then they'll merge with Bornholm and their focus tree again a lot. Because it should lock after I capitulate them, I'm pretty sure. Not guaranteed. Actually, I think that might only be they're in a faction and they surrender before the faction leader does. So maybe not. But they may or may not have a locked focus tree. Merging with Bornholm when they're both independent communist countries will unlock it. But I'm playing as Denmark here, so that's just a different branch of the same save. And if this goes very badly, I may go back to the day zero save here. But I do need to mess with something with the division templates. 7 minutes? God, I never talk fast enough, or I talk too much. I'm just going to call this template. I need to spend army XP to change my templates. And one of these I have 8 divisions of this and 1 of this, and they're both, it's too much normal artillery. I can send the normal artillery to the Soviets. They don't use rocket artillery, and somewhere I have 1 rocket artillery, 1 normal. Where is it? It's possibly, here we go, reserve artillery. These guys, they were in Copenhagen. They should be swapped to something else. I'm going to replace all the artillery battalions with rocket artillery, because they have a huge stockpile of rocket artillery, not that big, but substantial. And the artillery I can send to the Soviets, who are in the Central Powers and are at war with the United States. I want to weaken the US faction by bleeding their manpower. And the Central Powers look like they're actually winning this war, which amazes me. They're about to finish off Switzerland. They're already marching to France. Then they'll march down to Spain and with all that industry, and then they'll probably finish off Iran. And occupied parts of Saudi Arabia from the British, and at that point, and the Levant from the North Americans, at that point they'll have a lot of industry. They might actually, they're going to lose China, but Kazakhstan's eventually going to flip communist, join the British faction. If I do nothing, I did a little bit of spy action, but it gave less than 1% communist. This was a random event. I had nothing to do with this. The Communist Party of Kazakhstan will eventually take power in the country via random events, and then Soviet troops will march into Kazakhstan. They can reach Communist China here and either come to their relief if they've managed to hold on that long, which I doubt, or they'll liberate it and give Communist China, which is the Central Powers. This guy took over from Mao as the Communist faction leader after Mao capitulated. So these are the Uyghurs, basically, which historically, the part Uyghurstan that actually went communist along with Mao before 1936. And then Mao kind of marched in, you know, not with, I don't think there was a shot fired, but kind of like into Tibet. It was an invasion. And this is where we get to the so-called, I wouldn't say it's genocide of the Uyghurs. People say it's genocide, but it is ethnic cleansing in a way. It's a forced cultural assimilation. That's the word I'm looking for. They're not gassing people. Anyone who tells you they're using gas chambers, there's no evidence of that, but they are putting people into camps where they force them to, what they're basically doing is they're de-Islamifying them. They're locking up, and these are perfectly loyal communists, but they're most of them. Some of them are nowadays CIA affiliated, but they're some of them they do lock up radicals like Islamist terrorist types, but they also lock up their families, their friends, their acquaintances who are innocent out of it's like their philosophy is something along the line they justify to cut the cancer out and cut a wide margin or something. But that means that like 9 out of 10 people that lock up are innocent of any disloyalty or crime. And they re-educate them not into communism, because most of these people are already communists. This region actually went communist, I think, before Mao did. They re-educate them into its forced cultural and religious assimilation. They force atheism on them or whatever. I don't know if there's other religions, and they force them to speak the same dialect of Chinese. But yeah, this is an alt history, and in this alt history, it's not happening. Please don't understand, I'm not trying to erase what's going there. I'm saying that the words matter, and calling something a genocide has to mean that there's mass murder, unless you start using the cultural genocide definition, which if you use that definition, then the definition of genocide becomes so wide-ranging. Like, it's murky. What's going on in Palestine is genocide in our own world, in Israel-Palestine, because people are being murdered en masse. It's not just erasing cultural sites, which the Israelis are doing too. It's not just, and they're not actually trying to culturally assimilate. They're trying to kill and force people out of the country who they don't kill, like forced immigration. That's genocide. It's a blurry line, but the U.S. weaponizes the term, and in fact, I'm sure there's some trolls. If my channel had any viewers who try to report me, it's genocide. Oh no, they're doing horrendous stuff. It can be considered a crime, but that not every crime is genocide. It is a terrible crime against humanity, and the Holocaust museums and stuff. Well, the international bodies, because there is a U.S. Holocaust museum, will go on with whatever the U.S. government says. Would disagree about that being. There's no gas chambers. There's no people aren't being shot. They're losing their culture. It's cultural genocide, but it's not physical mass murder in China, in Western China. Looking here at the Ukraine, because the Central Powers, right, Ukraine flipped communist and joined the British Communist Alternative, because it's a communist-led faction, unlike the Central Powers, which are led by Austria-Hungary, but the Soviets joined them. Most nations that flip communist join the British Communist Alternative, though. And then Crimea, it's going to eventually flip communist via random events, because they'll get one, they'll increase. But right now it's capitalist, and it joined the North American Alliance. But even though this is connected by land, I guess it's a standoff. The Central Powers haven't marched into Crimea yet. Romanian troops, or Soviet troops, will eventually march into Crimea, I'm sure. Actually, the AI tends to divide up. If you look at it, it's some ungodly, like they have 50 armies, each of one division. When they have a big faction like this, and they send like, okay, one division to Romania, one, it's like they should, it's stupid. At some point, they'd be better off just like, okay, AI 1 takes this region, AI 2 takes this region, and that way we don't have 50 armies, most of them without generals. I guess I could show it to you, but then I have to tag back to Denmark. It's a mess. I'm sure you believe me. If you've ever tagged over to the AI, you've seen what I'm talking about. In like a big war, like the Allies in a historical scenario, they have so many nations. They run out of generals, and it's overwhelming. Like the bottom half of the screen is covered in armies. And like, like portraits, but they're empty portraits because they don't have generals in most of them. Anyways, so Sevastopol hasn't fallen yet, which historically was besieged by Nazi troops, and it held out like for years. The Soviets built forts in Sevastopol, and it held out for a very long time in Yalta, which is next to over the Yalta Conference, which divided up Europe after World War II, which a lot of people have amnesia about. Oh, Soviet troops just marched in Eastern Europe and never left. No, Churchill, quote, gave them Eastern Europe. In exchange, he got Greece and Turkey, where there was strong communist agitation, especially Greece. In fact, if left to its own devices, Greek communist partisans were such an important part of the liberation of Greece that the whole country would have gone communist if not for British interference in their politics. Basically, they unleashed Nazi garrisons that had not been disbanded on the communists in Athens, which is a seat of government. If you control Athens, you control the country, usually, unless you get a repeat of Red Finland, where Helsinki went communist, but a lot of the north was under a brutal authoritarian, what would be called non-aligned regime, probably in the game. It wasn't quite fascist, and they marched, although I think if you go fascist Finland, you get the leader who used to do that oppressive thing. He's one of your advisors or something. Yeah, and with German Freikorps help and British SAS, they marched down into Helsinki, where the communists had the industry and factories, but they didn't have most of the military sided against the communists, so they had mostly workers' militias that were not well trained. So they had the numbers, they had the industry, but they didn't have the army. And in a war of attrition, they would have won because they could have replaced their losses. They could produce new ammunition and guns, and the capitalists couldn't. But the capitalists got German, like German Imperial. This is before the Weimar Republic was founded, and British help, and the Red Finland was crushed, as was the communist revolutions in Czechoslovakia, Poland, the Baltic countries, and there was even a small one in Romania, though it never amounted to much. Yeah, communism was not just a Soviet thing. Heck, Italy almost had a communist revolution. There was workers took over the city of Genoa and Milan, but then they chose to negotiate with the government rather than stepped down, and the army marched in and arrested them all instead of honoring the deal that was cut out. And then Mussolini was funded by the Italian billionaires to crush communists and arrest them. And that's how you got Gramsci in prison off the Italian coast in a little island where he didn't get health care for a condition he had, a healthcare condition he'd already pre-existing. And he died due to that condition, even though he was a brilliant theorist who left us terms that we still use today, like the subaltern, which refers to post-colonial populations excluded from power. Anyways, Kazakhstan's going to flip communist. Kazakhstan's going to get invaded. Altai had a civil war trying to flip communist. The Soviet Republic is definitely going to lose because they only got 1/3 of the army, even though they got the majority of the industry and manpower. In a war of attrition, they'd win, but there's no way they hold out. At least they thought that, but then the capitalist forces stubbornly refused to advance. I sent volunteers them because I'm like, the Soviet Republic can't win. Well, they are winning, because all they have to do is raise their conscription law extensive. They can train. How do they have so little manpower when we're only 3 divisions in the country? These must be really big divisions. Anyways, they can raise at least 3 more divisions once they go to extensive conscription. They have way more industry in the Altaian Civil War. Wrong war. This is the Ethiopian. Yeah, they have about 12 factories, and there's about 4 in Altai. I think I tagged over in chat. So they have 3 times the industry, something like 20 times the manpower, and half the territory. They will win. They don't have an air base. I can't send air volunteers, though. They agreed to air volunteers, and then the game decided, hey, you get 0 air volunteers. It said 1 air wing, and then it updated after I got an agreement with Ethiopia, and it updated that down to 0. And Ethiopia said 2 and then became 1. I don't know what happened. I could reload the save and see if it fixes it, but it might not. And it screws with resource production, so maybe later. My air wing, my casts haven't started training anyways. They're in Bornholm. And I'm only training this wing because it's tiny, and I'm very, very short on fuel. But I do have a cast wing here. Which has very high ground attack. Doesn't show stats on bombing. But, you know, 3x heavy bomb locks. All, so. My casts could swing the Civil War, but it won't let me send them for some reason. I probably wouldn't want them. It's bitter cold. Supply efficiency is terrible. I bet the airbase is undersupplied. It's 2 provinces in the capital. So my troops are staying in the capital, and they are waiting to attack. Alright, I'm saying I'd take this faster. So I need to spend some army XP to improve their template. I've decided that this is dumb. So, I'm gonna rename this Cav template. Rename, and I'm gonna create a duplicate. This would just be called light cavalry because it still doesn't have that much in terms of actual artillery support. And the light cavalry have a support rocket artillery because they don't have that much of normal artillery, and I'm sending all to the Soviets. They can have a little bit of artillery support. They could also get breakthrough if I gave them engineers. I do have some support equipment for motorized recon. I have trucks production. Let's see, 93 soft attack, 95. Engineers cost a lot more than motorized. No, not a lot. Oh, barely more. Okay, so I'll just 0.42. I have to look at supply use. That's gonna be critical here. 0.42. Yeah, okay, I'll give them some engineers. Engineers and support rocket artillery, and I'll give them 40 breakthrough, which will planning bonus up to like 52. It's not gonna give them enough to avoid crits, but it'll reduce their rate of loss to something more reasonable, and reduce their org down to 50. But I'm gonna do this one at a time. So this is gonna be light cav template 1. This is gonna be decommissioned. I'm not gonna actually produce this. But first, light cav template 2. And this is gonna get engineers. The thing is, if I give it motorized, they will they'll need fuel. I can't guarantee they can get fuel everywhere. Okay, so light cav template 1 decommissioned. Right, it's down there. Light cav template. I'm gonna duplicate this. 3. I can give them, how much breakthrough would they get for some cavalry recon? Not much. They would get some soft attack though, and they actually get intel advantage if they fight long enough. Although it's, if they're volunteers, it's the home country has to get it. Okay. I'm not seeing anything else that's worth the equipment costs. So I won't say that. So light cav template 2. Or I just call this light cav. It's not, because this will be the one I use. I don't want to spam divisions. So these guys will get support equipment and some rocket artillery. This is going to drop them. They can do exercises in another country. Yeah, it's just aircraft that can't. Alright, these are gonna... It's gonna take a little time to train them, but I don't want to throw that much manpower away. So it requires 600 manpower, 30 support equipment. I have none available because I've currently earmarked it all for the Soviets, but they'll get some eventually. 10 infantry equipment and 12 rocket artillery. Boom. And then, when they get that, train them up to regular. It's not much, but it'll bring down their losses to an acceptable level, especially when they get buffs from generals and stuff. I don't want to throw away too much manpower. This guy, meanwhile, he's garbage. Where was Anders Falsen here. It would cost 20 political power. For 35, I could get an extra 10% breakthrough with this guy, making him the field marshal. That's probably better than this offensive doctrine guy. It would cut into my recruitment of new generals, though, which I really wanted to do a little more before we reorganize the army. So how many do I need? Well, I only have one who has brilliant strategist, and he's also politically connected, and he didn't even roll infantry officer, so maybe I get more. You know what, that's fine. It would also take 100 days to lose the debuffs. You would get, of course, maybe just make him a 1 across the board, but extra. It's going to be a few hundred manpower or one extra chance to get one extra general, which I give it less than 10% odds they get another brilliant strategist, and less than. But that brilliant strategist could save thousands of lives if he's an infantry officer. So let's see, 5% odds of, let's say, saving 2,000 men. It's like 100 men, risk averaged. If I do an aggressive assaulter now, it probably saves me like 200 men. Yeah, it's worth it. On average. But I don't know. Shoot. I really hate this. I'm only in this situation because AI uses its command power terribly and never recruited new generals the whole time it was sitting idle. Even though I think I remember giving Denmark a little extra command power here for enough, like 30. It doesn't nearly make up for how much the AI wasted. Oh, God. Well, to be fair, this general interface is going to get overwhelming if I have too many of them. I'll just promote him. And give him aggressive assaulter. He's, even with the recently promoted debuffs, he's still a better general than the current one. He won't have the extra planning or attack of a brilliant strategist until 100 days have passed, but he's better on the offense, though. This guy's better on the defense, attack on the defense, so I'll wait until I'm ready to attack and I'll switch to field marshals. Altean army group. Altaic volunteers. You know what? I'll write out the word volunteer. Why not? Okay, so these guys are gonna have to wait a little while. Meanwhile, back in Denmark, saving up political power to change my chief of the army, and I need to start justifying Holstein before too long, though I should probably choose some other country to waste any American guarantees. If I wait long enough, I might also flip Occitania, and then they won't guarantee stuff. They're also a major and they're democratic. They're communist, they won't guarantee them with other communist nations. Let's see, how are my spies doing here on flipping them? 0.01, 0.03, so 0.04 communist pressure a day. And that's probably scaled to 33% right now, so it's 0.01 per day, basically. Oh, that's going to take a long time. Really long time. I don't know. Maybe I'll content myself with volunteers for now. Let them pause. Although, can I afford the air XP to show this? I probably could, but let me show something with air design to you guys who have waited 30 minutes of me still talking. My brain has not been working well. I've had a long string of... And honestly, my brain is probably suffering a little from isolation. I'm in a family cabin because my roommate wants to murder me because of a cough. He's a psychopath. So I'm in a family cabin in a different state. Well, I tried to get the landlord to evict the guy, and then the roommate's ex-wife threatened to sue him. False accusations of racial discrimination, and he chickened out. So I'm gonna have to go back there, and I'm staying away as long as I can. I'm also fighting for my Social Security case. If I win it, then I can move out of state somewhere else. But if I move states when I'm halfway through, it resets the thing. And I need Social Security to not become homeless and die, because I'm disabled on COVID and I can't work. I can barely even talk here, as you guys can tell. Alright, so fighter bombers. I can show this to you guys. So, I'm sure some of you are aware that there's a combat, and actually, let's show this first. So, show, don't tell. So there's this stat, air support mission efficiency. This multiplies the air attack, air defense, and agility of any divisions that are, any air wings that are engaged in ground support missions, CAS missions. So it's the actual, it's not based on plane type, although it's based on running this close air support mission. So tactical bombers or fighter bombers. I say or fighter bombers because it's mission based. It's got nothing to do with whether it's CAS or fighter. So you could actually give a fighter a bomb locks, and if you used them in close air support mission, they get those stat buffs. So that, however, I'm also running battlefield support, which means anything that's classified as a close air support aircraft type gets 20% agility. So I can merge those to create fighter bombers that are actually trade very well with enemy fighters, although their primary, it's kind of a mix. They strafe ground forces. They do some damage with their CAS weapons, but I can't heavily arm with CAS weapons. Their agility stinks, and if they engage by enemy fighters, they'll actually defend themselves and actually trade off well with enemy fighters, especially at low detection rates. Because well, I say especially at low detection, but if the enemy have bombers and fighters in the region, then their air superior fighters are 100% visibility. I can see them all, and they suffer a lot more losses. CAS are by default at double visibility, and fighters, when there's no bombers, are only at default visibility. So they might, yeah, visibility affects how many attacks you can deal to the enemy. At full visibility, the CAS would trade off well. Visibility things can really skew that. Stuff like radar can push that in my direction, and the enemy having lots of fighters can push in there. So all other things being equal, which is a big if, they trade well. But anyways, so to get, first of all, the agility bonuses from from combat unit destruction, right? Gonna want the advanced close air support, just the base 50, advanced airframe 50 agility. Combat unit destruction gives them an extra, should be 20%, but it's saying more. Anyways, I don't know. There's all these buffs. I forget what each one. One of them is from a national spirit that gives agility to various buffs just for being classified as CAS, and then additional buffs for running a CAS mission. So what I can do is create a fighter bomber. These, by the way, help with logistics strikes, which are actually a good mission to run, so they're not even useless when doing... If I do logistics strikes, they will do well, although they won't get the close air support mission efficiency, but... can give them a second set of rocket rails. Rocket rails barely reduce agility, so this, on close air support, still has just shy of 70 agility. Now, someone would be advanced airframe, that's 4 aluminum. That's not worth doing over improved airframes. You would be correct if I didn't do this. Players are allergic to running non-strategic materials. I don't know why. It has importance in some cases. For instance, an advanced airframe with this can still get almost the same. I checked the numbers. It's almost exactly the same air defense as when running ground support missions. Once I let's see, it's 18.7, and a version that replaced that that was an empty slot. I was going to replace this with armor plates, right? If I had to replace that with alright, so this has 23.4 air defense, and then I'll get multiplied by an extra, if I was running continuous strikes, 70 or 75%, it would be a huge bonus to that, so that it would be over 100 agility, and really high air attack and defense. So it would trade well with enemy fighters, and it would cost only 34.22 and only 2 aluminum. I might even replace this with armor plates because rubber. So that would be a fighter bomber. And eventually with modern airframes, they cost the same 4 aluminum. They'll be even better at doing that than but I need axial jet engines before you can build modern airframes. The alternative would be to do and heavy machine guns, because cannons reduce the agility a lot. At very high agility advantages, you have very low chance of the enemy hitting you. It can make a QB reducing chance to get hit. If you have double the enemy's agility, is reduced by 45%. If you have triple the enemy's agility, it's reduced by 9%. This would be more than, with the mission support buffs, it'd be more than, the other one would be more than triple the enemy's agility. So, oh yeah, this is bomb locks. This needs to be switched to rocket rails. So, very high time to live, because they can just dodge most hits enemy fighters make at them when on close air support missions. Somewhat less agility, 24.5, but it costs 1 more aluminum than the other thing. And yeah, I guess it's got higher range, 877. So this is the most comparable. 24.5 air defense, 35 cost. So, versus the range is somewhat less, but yeah, instead of 24.5, it's 23.4. Almost the same air defense, higher agility. It actually will have a longer time to live than the other one because of the higher agility. And it costs less aluminum and less production cost. And if I want more range, which I probably do, I consider doing this instead. Higher production cost. People are allergic to using defense turrets, just like they are to this. They shouldn't be. Defense turrets, they say, oh, they deal very little damage. That's because you put them on tactical bombers running close air support missions, which have like 1 agility. So the enemy dodges all the hits that are fired at them by the defense turret. Because I just said, if you have triple the enemy's agility, which if you have 1 agility, any aircraft with 3 or more is going to take less than 1 out of 10 hits at them. And it caps out at 135% reduction chance to hit, which means they'll dodge 100% of the hits if you don't have other modifiers like speed advantage that can cancel that. So the defense turrets pretty much never hit anything on your tactical bombers because you don't have any agility. This has very high agility and higher speed, which means the enemies, I might even have a speed advantage in some aircraft, and the enemy will have less in terms of hitting this. But the high agility means, especially with the mission efficiency, these defense turrets will actually hit enemies and shoot them down reliably. They're actually quite good. Here, 3 air attack, not a ton, but 4 air defense. The important thing is this has higher range than if armor plates, but it's a higher production cost. So it's a question if I want this or I want the armor plates. Honestly, I probably want the armor plates though, and just deal with a little less range for a little lower cost. These would be trainers, so these wouldn't be my best quality fighter bombers. Even these are probably what I would use to train pilots in advance of getting modern airframes, which the modern airframes might be equipped with jet engines. They'd be faster, they would even be even more agile, and I could consider giving them a defense turret if they don't have the range I need. But range is less important on a trainer, but I want some ability to still. The trainers after I'm done training, the pilots would still be engaged in combat. The thing is, I don't want to spend a lot, because maybe half of them might have died in air accidents by the time I start using them in combat. If I train them for a long time, more likely, I calculate around 10 to 20%. I'm not going to train that many pilots. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but you get a lot of blizzards in Denmark in the winter. So, and unless I'm going to sit there and micro and say, every time there's a blizzard, I'm going to disable air exercises, I'm going to lose a lot of fighters. So, I could also switch this for armor plates to bring down the cost even more. Reduces the range to 675, which is just enough to cover the Danish belts for most of my air bases. So they can do cast missions to protect against naval invasions in my homeland, or air superiority missions or air interception missions where they fight at much less. They don't get the bonus to agility, but they still have 71 agility, which is great. So they'll still make decent fighters, but they'll have over 100 agility when they're on cast missions, so they can provide air support. And I can have, if I want, dedicated fighters, or maybe probably dedicated fighters. No, yeah, the advanced airframes can have a second rocket rail. Brings down their agility, and down a little, brings up their costs. But that means that they'll do a lot. They'll do twice the ground attack damage against ME divisions when they actually run the cast missions, which I remind you don't run unless there's ground combats they can actually be assigned to. So, yeah, this is a decent fighter bomber. It costs 33.3. It only takes 2 aluminum. However, I probably don't want self-sealing fuel tanks. The rubber is going to be too expensive. So I probably go with a defense turret, which points 21 air defense, but the agility is so high that that's fine. And a 675 range. I don't use the armor plates because what kind of range am I looking at with third set? Oh, 600, that's okay. Fine. 33.3 production cost. That is probably what I'm looking at using to train my fighter bomber pilots. And then once I have a bunch of them trained, which I'm short on fuel, that's why it's going to take a while. By that point, I'll probably have finished the jet engines project, started on the axial jet engines project, and all the pilots ready as soon as I start producing modern airframes, which I have to tech after axial jet engines. Alright, so it'll be a while. I'll have time to train lots of pilots, and then, like, then I can give modern airframes, and then that'll free up the planes that were used as trainers to train another. It's going to take a while.